Black Women for Positive Change presents The Perils and Opportunities of Artificial Intelligence, moderated by Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds.
Because this is still the day that God has made.
Good evening. Most gracious God and Almighty Father, we thank you for this day and opportunity to come before you with our thoughts, our concerns, things that are baffling at times. We come with more requests to ask for your guidance, and we admit that we have difficulty over our own creation, where it seems as though you may have left us to our own devices. So we bring our advances, we bring our confusion, and our strong belief in you, not only to guide and lead us during this program, but for all times. Please lead and guide us as we seek to do the best in and for your creation. We thank you even now, in the name of our true Messiah, our Savior, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Now, we want to ensure that we all know Dr. Stephanie Myers, because she is the leader of our group, the Black Women for Positive Change, which is making a difference nationally and globally with our main objective of creating programs and platforms to change the culture of violence. Dr. Myers, you want to say hello to our guests?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, and welcome. Welcome to all of you. You are each unique this evening. Joining us for a subject on artificial intelligence says a lot about who you are and says a lot about the importance that you place on being in the future and not just the past. And that's something that is very critical. We know that artificial intelligence is a massive issue, and we're very proud to have Dr. Reynolds as a pioneer in our community, leading us to address this issue. This month during October, we have had the 12th annual month of nonviolence, families, voters' rights, and opportunities. And this event tonight comes under the heading of opportunity, because artificial intelligence is the opportunity to learn. It's the opportunity to gain knowledge about a field that most of us have no clue about. And it's an opportunity to introduce this subject to our young people who can begin to address the issues that Dr. Reynolds will mention tonight. We're also very proud of the fact that not only has she brought this issue to us as a topic for this workshop, but she's also written a book on the topic. And here's a copy of her book. And it's called The Rise and Fall of the Techno Messiah. So here we have our moderator tonight, who's also the chaplain for Black Women for Positive Change. And this particular book is available now on Amazon. I hope it's showing. I seem to be getting some blurring here, but if you can't see it, it's The Rise and Fall of the Techno Messiah. So thank you, Dr. Reynolds, and thanks to all of you. And I look forward to hearing these insightful and provocative comments from our guests tonight and from all of you. Thank you.
Well, good evening. As you just have heard, we're going to focus on artificial intelligence that has been called the most transformative, life-changing force of our age. AI, which is the ability of a computer or robot to mimic problem solving that usually requires humans, is poised to revolutionize nearly every aspect of our lives. New tools can paint portraits, pass some medical and legal exams better than people, can produce fake videos, voices, and hack your websites. Its algorithms have also been blamed for deepening systematic racism and producing worries of massive unemployment. But there are still incredible opportunities. AI and emerging technologies are opening such avenues as working on space stations on Mars, discovering new tools to combat climate change, to work in cybersecurity and programming more human-like robots. So there's a peril, but there's also opportunities. So I want to begin with sort of a thought on the workplace, because we have Peter Atoy, who is with us, and he is the founder and CEO of Spiritual. And he'll correct me if I didn't say that name right. And it's a technology startup that uses artificial intelligence to help teams build contextually aware applications. He's led over 500 teams across a diverse range of sectors, from retail to financial to cybersecurity. He is also an expert on the future of work, which we all need to know about. So we're going to start with you, Peter. Are we supposed to be afraid that we're not going to have jobs, and which jobs are going to disappear?
First of all, thank you for having me on this panel. I took a look at the other speakers, and I'm quite humbled to be considered to be in the company of you all today. This is a reverberating topic across not just the enterprise sector, where I focus mostly on, but also on the consumer side. There's a lot of tools that have come out into the mainstream over the last, I would say, year or two, mainly ChatGPT. I think everyone has probably heard of it at this point. What this is doing right now, it is changing a lot of behavior in society with how we process information, where we go for information, where we believe the source of truth is, to get it as quickly as possible. So with that, a couple of economies are changing, and I'll give you guys a quick example. Traditionally, people would go to a marketing agency, a marketing freelancer, or a marketing company for advice. They will go to a branding agency for the same thing. But now there's tools out there, within a matter of seconds, you can type in a request and it can generate information that maybe you would have paid a couple $100 in billing services to get. That is just one example out of many. And as we've known in history, every time there is a revolution, when kerosene came around, there were feared that there would be explosions. Electricity came around, there was fear that people would be electrocuted. And when the cars came around, there was fear about accidents, aviation, the planes will fall down. But what we've seen, using that example, every time there's a revolution, new economies come to be. And there is a period of time where there's an adjustment or a shift to the old economies. And entrepreneurs are the ones that are driving what those new opportunities are going to be. And when they're successful, they create new jobs, they hire new people in what is shifting towards the future. And the situation takes care of itself over time. But in the interim, there's confusion in what the future means until there's clarity. So we shouldn't really be fearful of what artificial intelligence is going to do. It would be more productive to think about what is shifting in the economy, in particular, whatever field that you're in, and you can think about what is the best case for using artificial intelligence. With that being said, I think in this panel, we can dive a little bit deeper into some of the concerns as far as safety, as far as guardrails that need to be put in place. As with those other technologies that I mentioned in history, those things need to be thought about in order for those technologies, and in this case, artificial intelligence, to function properly in society without causing harm to anyone that uses the products.
So now I've heard that the job loss will start at the bottom with like rote employees that do certain things like in factories, and then go up to maybe hospital workers, and eventually go up to your financial systems. And can you clear that up to first of all, talk about which groups you think are going to lose their jobs first, and then second, go into what we can do. How do we make the shift so we can be valuable, because I fear that if we don't make the shift and if we're not enhanced, we may end up on a human junk pile that we're just tossed aside and on the way to prisons and to the drug quarters and that kind of thing if we can't adjust and equip ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll start it by talking about what artificial intelligence is good at. And when we talk about technology in general, it's about bits, it's about information being fed into a system. It's about a method of learning the information that has been put into a system and the patterns that are involved in order to achieve an output. So the kind of things that fall into that category are defined tasks. So those are the first ones that people are tackling. So if I know the process for creating a brand is coming up with a logo based on what kind of business that you're in and what industry that you're in, then artificial intelligence can understand what is the mood of a color, what is the type of a message, type of size or shapes that it should create a brand article in the example of marketing that I was giving. Because there's certain things that we know from society, from sample data sets that the artificial intelligence systems can feed in. A really simple one is when you see the color yellow and red, you immediately get hungry when they're put together. And that's why McDonald's uses those two colors, right? It's quite effective. Chick-fil-A uses red for a good reason. And if I'm selling a luxury good and I use the color purple, it symbolizes regal, scarce, and revered. And so these are the kind of things that exist in data sets out there. Now, when it comes to, this is a term that is used in the future of work, one of the areas that I'm in, is called the deskless workforce. So these are people that are not sitting in an office somewhere and performing a high intellectual task without moving around too much. So if someone is a field operator, if someone is in some facility and involves moving around, talking to people, customer service is the biggest one that people are going after first, because question and answer to problems are largely very well defined. If anyone over here has ever worked at a sales call center or customer service call center, they usually give them a rubric of answers to give for certain problems. Now, these are the things that people are going after first, and you can easily feed them into an artificial intelligence system. And we are at a point right now where these systems can also understand your voice, can understand intent, can understand emotion. So if you're angry in a customer service call, then they know this is an escalation answer. If you're still pretty calm, then they would know this is an initial answer. So the defined task for the people working in the deskless workforce space are the ones that are going after first, because they're the easiest for an artificial intelligence system to understand. The difficult part is the creativity, and that's where we humans thrive over these systems. Some people would argue that some of these artificial intelligence systems right now are showing great creativity, but they're showing creativity based on existing samples. So they'll read existing things, how they've been solved, discover the patterns, and that's how they can produce material. Now, in society, culture changes often, language changes often, fashion changes often with time going by. And these are the things that, if they were not put in a data set, an artificial intelligence program will not understand. These are the things that humans come up with, the creativity part. So that is the barrier that is high to enter the activities, the type of jobs that require high creativity and not necessarily just incremental improvements on processes and steps. There will be that would take some time for artificial intelligence to become really good at.
I'm going to also talk to my grandson on this line here, Jabari, Canada. He's a student at MIT, and he's specializing in AI and architecture. and he also has a background in film, some of which can be done without a human. And he's watched the Hollywood strike, and he's wondering that the strike was to protest the fact that some of the scripts were going to be written by AI, and even some of the people. And so I want him to look from where he is and see, what do you think the future of work is going to be about as you prepare to get into the workforce?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for having me, Dr. Reynolds. And I appreciate all of your insights, Peter. And yeah, I think to speak to the point about the film industry, I think there were some concerns from like two levels. There were both concerns from writers, and there were also concerns from actors, like both relating to AI. I think aside from the actors, some were concerned that we can use AI systems to basically 3D scan certain like actors or performers and be able to use their likeness, you know, in perpetuity for either low pay or a pretty flat rate, and that, you know, definitely would kind of alter the sort of pay that an, you know, actor would be able to have. And you know, it's not something that's commonplace right now, but definitely a concern down the line. And it's funny enough, there was actually a Netflix Black Mirror episode about it, and you know, now these things are actually like happening in real life. But you know, imagine someone doing a 3D scan of you and being able to write, you know, any show about you and be able to like use that actor. It's you know, pretty interesting, but I think so much of it comes down to what we want collectively. On the flip side of the actors' concerns, it's what the writers are concerned about. And I think with the popularity of like ChatGPT in the past like year or so, we've seen that it can serve as like a really helpful tool for writers. But like Peter said, a lot of these systems for creativity are only as helpful as the data sets that are provided to it. So if I feel like when it comes to the amount of output that these systems can produce, then it's definitely like a concern. But when it comes to the type of quality of the creativity that's coming from these systems, you know, at least at this point, they're not really going to surpass what certain incredible writers are doing now. But it will provide like a lot of variety in what's out there. But I think that one of the big concerns really relates to payment and making sure that creative individuals, they're properly being compensated for their labor, and making sure that they're valued within these systems, you know, particularly in the film industry.
I want my son, Dr. Keith McGee has joined, and I want to ask him a question and then have the audience be able to talk to our experts, and there are others to come. But Keith, I'm looking in America at the workforce, and I want to know, you look across the globe, what changes do you see AI producing in the labor force, workforce? Are professors like you going to be needed? Or, you know, are they just, because the artificial intelligence can write speeches, essays, even books. And so what's going to happen, you know, as you look globally across the pond?
Thank you for the question. And I'll say to you that the best way to respond to that is that I chair the Metropolitan London Black Police Advisory Council. And today we had a meeting talking about live facial recognition and the impact that it has, and how we're going to deal with that about public safety. And what I virtually pushed back with the police service was, if this live facial recognition is what you're going to do to identify criminals in community, ultimately there'll come a time where you will not have a job. There'll be less opportunities for you all to be employed as a result of it. So that's my example. And the short answer to your question, everyone's going to be put out of work eventually if technology is continuing to advance in such a way. When I boarded the airplane last night to fly back to London, they did facial recognition in order for you to board the plane. And I said, and the lady, the flight staffer said, "Oh, it's not working. We've got to get this perfected." And I said, "Well, I don't think you want that, because I think you'd like to keep your job." So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, put it in the audience. I remember a conversation I had with Peter, and he was talking about how facial recognition systems can really be a detriment. Okay, so you're supposed to attend a meeting, and it's very cold outside, and you see white people go and the facial recognition systems work. They go in the door, and then you go there, and it says you can't get in. And because the research has said that often Black faces are not recognizable like white faces. Peter, can you pick up where we talked about that and what could possibly happen because of these facial recognition systems? For example, it can lock people out instead of bring people in.
Yeah, thanks for bringing back up that example. So this is actually, it's not funny, but there's a segment of the population that thinks this is a funny subject. We have systems, when you think about, I'll give you, if you've ever gone to a public restroom, let's say at a really advanced airport or similar, or your workplace, and you have to, for example, scan your hand so you can, the soap will come out or the water will come out, or the air dryer or anything like that. And the example that Keith gave about the airport scanners. So all these systems, going back to the subject, as they're only as good as the data that is fed to them. So imagine that it's only 3 of us in a room and we're building this AI product. We're going to build it based on what we know in our own biases. The tests that we're going to perform are going to be as good as us 3 and what we know. So if we do not consider all demographics while we are testing and building this artificial intelligence system, and we deploy it in some marketplace as a product, it will only be as good as the maximum of the biases that we have, us 3, sitting in a room. And maybe we deploy it to a population of 100 million people, and we did not consider 75% of that or 89% of that in the assumptions that we build artificial intelligence system. So the problem comes into where it's deployed. We have apartment systems nowadays that use facial recognition for allowing or denying entry. And that one sample example that I was talking to Dr. Reynolds about, imagine it's a cold winter day, you're coming home or you're going into some building, it's snowing outside, it's freezing, and the entry system is a facial recognition scanner, and it doesn't recognize you. Mm-hmm. And there's no attendant on duty, or you can't see anyone, and you're standing outside and there's nowhere to go. Maybe you got a cab and there's no cabs available. You order an Uber and the wait is 30 minutes. So what do? It becomes a problem. You go into some country and they cannot recognize your face and you're in between ports. Do you now buy another ticket to go back home because you cannot get into that country? What do? The bathroom situation with the soap coming out in water is a mild case, but getting into a building on a winter day, getting into a country stuck in between ports is a very, very serious case, right? That's relying on artificial intelligence. So these systems need a diversity of people that are actually building them. This is not just race. They're really good at very minute things that are being fed to them. This can be, we tested in all round faces. Some people have sharp jawbones. Some people have small eyes, big eyes. Right. Some people have hair on their head. Some people have goatees. Some people don't. You need to put everything possible that would be a feature in your populace through this system and train it over time in order for it to understand all those variations in order for you to deploy something to your populace that is going to work for everyone. If you don't do that, or you consider a very small sample set, then you have left out a portion of the populace. And if you deploy it in a very serious system, door entry, airport entry, then people are going to suffer as a consequence of that.
Yeah, I've seen Tanya's hand up. I'm gonna make one more statement to come into you, Tanya. What really bothers me is this example. There was a woman in Detroit. She was 11 months pregnant and she was getting her kids ready for school. There was a knock on the door. And when she opened the door, it was 2 police who was arresting her, taking her down to the jail and saying that she is being arrested because a facial identification system had identified her as a person who had just robbed the cleaners. And she was put in a jail. I mean, she had contractions. Her stomach was hurting, her feet were hurting, and she's had to spend the night. And then the next day they said, well, I guess we didn't get it right. And found out in Detroit, in that period of time, that there was 8 Black African-American women who were found to be in that situation. And that's just one segment. But this system is going to be very detrimental to us. Now, Tanya had, and this is why I'm so glad that you're on, because sometimes when I was talking about artificial intelligence and new emerging, people say, we don't have anything to do with us. You're just talking about something. We don't care about that, but we have to care because it is about us. And Tanya, you raise your question, and we're going to go to my good friend Calvin Lawrence, a brilliant engineer and author and all that other kind of stuff that's just joined us with Peter and my grandson. Tanya.
Yes, I wanted to say this would be addressed to Peter, Keith, and Jabari. So I'm going to try to sum everything up in one. In terms of the artificial intelligence, Keith, you said that it was a point that you made to the stewardess that you better be glad, so you can keep your job. Then I'm thinking about Jabari when you said about the GPT, chat GPT. And it's true, even in supermarkets now, and how everything, you don't need someone working there at the supermarket to check out. We're basically doing their jobs. Different things that we need, we can just go and do it through AI. So how is it going to change in terms of people maintaining their jobs or their careers? Because, with going to the airport, if I remember I was going through the TSA and they said, well, this is not your face. I said, it is my face. Here's my passport. And I had to present my passport in order for me to go through for TSA clear check. So how do you think AI is going to influence this world now? This is for either one of you.
Well, Calvin just came on, so let Peter rest for a minute. Okay. And Calvin, you want to take Tanya's question? I want to say first who this man is, because he is like Peter. He's a distinguished engineer, and he's that IBM member of the IBM Corporate Ethics Board, and he happens to hold numerous patents, and he has a new book out called Hidden in White Sight: How AI Empowers and Deepens Systematic Racism. And I can't wait to just get to that hot topic. So, Calvin, I should say Dr. Lawrence. Okay, what about Tanya's question?
So Tanya, I'm gonna let you, before I ramble, I'm gonna let you ask your question again. That way I can make sure I'm pretty precise in the answer.
I knew you were going to say that.
Okay, Tanya. Is it Tanya?
Tanya.
Okay, great.
I was just trying to bring everything together in terms of the points that Peter, Keith, and Jabari brought up. So I'm thinking more or less in terms of the chat GPT, the going through the airport, and I gave the situation, the scenario where I had to present my passport because when they did the facial recognition, they said it wasn't me and I had to provide my passport in order to go through. So I guess my question is now, what happens in a world where there are not humans there and it's just the AI? And if that were to happen at an airport, or how is it going to affect other positions for humans?
I think it's scary. I think
Okay.
it's scary, right? I think that's the first thing that comes to mind, especially for folk like us who build these apps. I mean, for a long time, for about 8 years, I was CTO for IBM Smarter Cities organization globally. And as a part of that, my auspices, we had a product called Intelligent Video Analytics, which is really a facial recognition piece of software that IBM used. And the whole idea behind it was that there would be a human interaction point, not just because we know that facial recognition systems from an accuracy level is about 60%. Like they'll say folk who sell those products and people who architect them like Clearview and others, they will say it's about 85, 90%. But typically 60% means that 6 out of 10 times you're going to get it right, and the other 4 times you're going to get it wrong. That's just by average, right? So the idea behind it is that if you do not have some human intervention, some person to actually go off and make the decision, AI at its core should be a recommendation component for some human to say, hey, this is good, this is bad. But what's happening, and we're seeing it, is because AI is such a financial opportunity for clients and folk who are looking to make things quick, better, or to do things they haven't done before, you run into that situation, that question that you might have at TSA or any place, right, where you're using AI to determine who you are.
Right.
And that in itself is troublesome, simply because we know that typically in order to build these systems, we are feeding it with training data. And the training data on you, for instance, might be a picture that you took when you were 16 years old. Might be a picture that in your job, we might have pulled driver's license information from the DMV. And basically that's how we're comparing your picture now with another picture. So somebody who we've seen examples, as a matter of fact, a system that was built just recently, where it was a kind of a TSA type solution where, the person was 18 years old at the time that the picture in the database had him. And basically they said he had done something. They stopped him at the airport. And the reality of it is that the guy is 38 years old now. So the person who was 18 years old, who looks like him today, is not even related to him. So now you've just charged him, or you just disturbed his peace from a picture that they think is you today, when in reality of it, that picture looks nothing like you today. It just looks like you when you were 18. So to your point, I mean, there's so much behind that question that you ask. I can't help but ramble, but I will say that it's quite troublesome. We've seen examples after examples, and again, those companies, like the one that I work for, to be quite honest, we're constantly challenged with this issue, like this whole concept behind what I call profit versus social responsibility, because you're gonna basically make lots of money by using facial recognition. Everybody wants to do it.
Okay, thank you very much.
I want to shift. I'm coming back to this question that I want to shift and bring Peter back in you, Dr. Lawrence and Jabari, because this is very disturbing to me. Recently, about 1,000 scientists wrote a paper and a letter calling a halt to certain new generative AI tools, stating the possibility that they were so dangerous that they could eventually outnumber and outsmart us, consider us obsolete, and replace us. And Elon Musk, for example, has called AI summoning the devil, the demon, to quote him accurately. And some have even said AI is even more dangerous as nuclear weapons because of replication. They can replicate themselves. So my question to all three of you is, should we be fearful of AI? And if we are, what can we do to make the tech companies who are rolling in dough now, these are so prosperous, what can we do to protect ourselves and in our world? I'll start with you, Peter, and come back to Calvin and hit Jabari.
Yeah. So on the fear question, I'll start by saying this. There's companies that have come out this year, and notably, there's a company called Anthropic. I think they got funded sometime last year, but they left OpenAI, the team that went to Anthropic, to actually build privacy and safety guardrails for artificial intelligence systems, something called large language models. So at the time when they were at OpenAI, it wasn't a thought on what are the guardrails and what are the systems that need to be put in place. So I would start by saying there's entrepreneurs that are actually working on this specific problem because, you know, being in a capitalistic society, every problem turns into a company kind of solution. So I will start by saying that there's entrepreneurs working on the safety problem. The letter that you're talking about, I read about it as well. And that was when these artificial intelligence systems were being deployed before people thought about the safety ramifications. If you think about the possibility of AI being smarter than a human, depending on the subject matter, think about how many pieces of information you can put together at the same time based on any context that someone is asking you. You know, can you talk about healthcare? Can you talk about finance? Can you talk about the law? Can you talk about current events, historical figures in the same realm, same sentence in real time without your head spinning or drawing a blank or just saying, I don't feel like talking about that right now, or you just don't know at all? Think about a system that is plugged into all these sources of information and can pull it depending on any context and can serve multiple people at the same time. So it's very possible that an artificial intelligence system can be contextually aware over a lot of subject matter at the same time, more so than a human being. So that's very possible. Now, where's the danger? What is it tied to? I was talking to someone who was ex-Navy SEAL. He retired. He was one of the first Black underwater demolition people in the Navy SEALs. And he was talking to me about artificial general intelligence in the military context. Now we have systems that can actually scan your face and can say this is the target. And you're walking in a field or in a city and it identifies the wrong target and it's tied to a weapon and it fires off the weapon. Well, it's too late for someone to say that was the wrong person because it already executed, right? So what is it tied to becomes the problem. Now, if it's tied to a copy of marketing information that was published to a website, the ramifications are lower than if it was tied to a weapon, for instance, right? So depending on the industry that it's being deployed to, if you're deploying this in healthcare, if you're deploying this in mortgage applications, if you're deploying this in law enforcement, in defense, then the ramifications are more severe, right? So I look at this as, and as I mentioned, as entrepreneurs working on this specific problem right now, whenever the products are new and categories are new, people are thinking about the revenue accruements of the opportunity. much less about the safety or the ramifications. And then it takes time after these systems have been deployed to where people think about, whoa, wait a minute. Did you think about this, X, Y, and Z? And they did not. And they're generating revenue. So that's the reality of the society that we're in. So the fear to me depends on where it's being deployed. If I went into a clinic and they're using artificial intelligence about attributes about myself to serve my healthcare, I would be really skeptical. I would want to know what samples, what information do you really have about me? Is it accurate? Are you going to provide the right kind of healthcare, or are you going to misdiagnose me for the symptoms that I came in with? Right. So the fear is very valid. And there's people that are working on this problem, but it goes back to a big topic that I talked to Dr. Reynolds about. The solution in my mind is having a diverse group of people in the room whenever these systems are being built. Right. And when we talk about diversity, is much more than race. It's about attributes, it's about religion, it's about culture, it's about behavior, because these systems are being deployed to the whole populace. And we do not do things the same way. We do not prefer the same things. We do not have the same attributes within us. We're very, very different in a large population. And that's what I mean by we need to have the diversity of people in the room whenever these systems are being built as a solution long-term in my mind.
Yeah, I was out in Silicon Valley not too long ago, and I certainly did not see people look like us working there in managerial positions. And the statistics say that about 3% of African Americans are in positions of authority that they can make these kinds of decisions. But I'm going to ask my friend Calvin, because he is at IBM. Should we be fearful? Should we be fearful like these scientists say? And Phyllis, I think you had asked a question, so I haven't forgotten you.
Yeah, I was doing a C-SPAN interview a couple of weeks ago, and that was the subject. Really, that was the topic. When you look at large language models, you kind of mentioned it earlier. Most applications that we build are not generative AI at all, not large language models. I think that's just the flavor of the day. If you look at 90% of the applications that has been built around AI and that we are building, they're not large language models. They are kind of predictive models in itself. The whole concept of this AI is gonna end the world. AI is going, this whole concept that you hear, I think it's a diversion, and it's a way that people deflect the issue. Because me personally, someone who, and those of us who are on the call, I won't just say myself, this is not something that's going to happen in 10 years. It's happening right now, like today. These applications that we're talking about, and I think big tech, as well as these other folks, they want to detract from what's happening today and make us think, give us this okie doke and say, hey, look, it's going to kill all of us, not just Black folk, right? In 10 years, that probably will happen. But like any other thing that has been done, especially here on this side of the pond in the US of America, in the USA, the challenge that we have now is, what are we going to do today? We know that in 10 years, AI, the accuracy rate of AI could very well exceed and excel the human brain. We know that, right? But today, what AI does for us, it scales existing racist tendencies. It scales it, right? So, for instance, take I think we can beat up policing and law enforcement, but someone mentioned earlier mortgage components. I talk about this in the book. A friend of mine who basically he and his wife, he went to Morehouse, his wife went to Spelman, and basically they moved from New Jersey to Georgia, and they actually had getting ready to buy a house. They had gotten pre-approved, and we as Black folk, we know how to get a loan. We know we got to have good credit. We know we have to have a low debt income ratio. We have to be working for a certain job, and we have to prove thereof, right? So that's a underwriter making the decision on whether or not we're going to get a loan. Well, what's happening now in the industry is AI is replacing underwriters. So now AI is making the decision. And my friends, they ended up on the day before closing, getting a call saying they were not going to close because the algorithm said that they weren't qualified. Well, my friend who knows that I'm in this space calls me up. And now I know exactly what's happening. I know how these applications are built. I've worked on these teams to kind of decide. And so what they do is that an AI algorithm can crunch more than 4 parameters. An AI algorithm can crunch thousands of parameters at the same time. One such parameter could very well be, as it was in their case, who's living in the house with you? What? Is there a felon that lives in the house with you? Because if there's a felon that lives in the house with you, the bank says that your risk scores goes up. Now, does that have anything to do with your loan? Now, in our neighborhoods, I don't know about you, but my mom, if my brother or a sister got out of jail, they would come home and live with my mom. So my mom, when she fills out her loan application to refinance her house or to get another house, she's not going to be asked who lives in the house with her. Well, when we talk about scale, right? So there's no law that says that pick your favorite mortgage company that says they can't do that. It's their money. They can make all types of decisions. So the algorithm basically can choose to not let you get a loan for things other than those 4 characteristics that we talk about. So for me, that is more important today. We know that's happening. We know that that's happening today. So for me, why would I be so worried about whether AI is going to kill us all in 15 years or in 20 years? I think it's a diversion, and what we're seeing is that now tech companies who are lobbying to change the laws, they're saying, let's talk about 25 years down the road, when the reality of it is they should be talking about today. Like what's happening now with algorithms that are being built and holding tech companies accountable, right, for the systems that they, not just tech companies, because it's just not designers and data scientists. Someone said earlier about who's in the room. Well, I've been on hundreds and hundreds of application environments. I've never been on a team with more than 2 Blacks, ever. Like hundreds of application environments and teams, never been on a team with more than 2 Blacks. So that tells you right there that there's an issue with who's at the table. So, that's my long-winded way of saying I'm not that concerned about whether AI is going to kill us all or end the world. I'm more concerned about what I see today and what's being built and designed and developed and deployed.
Reverend Reynolds, can I ask a question of the
Phyllis had her hand up first, and you.
Okay, and Cheryl Alexander has her hand up.
Okay, it's Phyllis, Dr. and Dr. Myers.
Thank you so much for this wonderful panel that is very informative. We've heard about the social imperatives and perhaps unfairnesses of AI in facial recognition and other ways. We've heard about moral imperatives with healthcare, with policing, etc. Dr. McGee and others have asked about the economic changes that will occur due to AI and perhaps the replacement of people in jobs. My question is, how do we prepare our communities and our young people to survive in this environment. Now, let's assume that, you know, we can overcome the racial biases of the facial recognition, etc. What do we tell our young people to major in? What do we tell them to pursue as careers in this environment, which is, as the last speaker just said, is now. It's not even 20 years from now, it's now. So please, I mean, help. Thanks.
Who wants to be the first here to take that one? Peter, you want to take it, and Claire, Calvin, and Jabari.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that.
Okay, Jabari.
Or Peter, if you'd like to go.
Go ahead first, Jabari.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'd like to, I guess, address both points, both the question of like fear in AI, and then also like Phyllis's question about you know, what should young folks like study. And I know it's kind of a tough question because you know, so much is going to change and we don't really know exactly how things are going to change. But I know there are some people who might say like, okay, like go out and you have to study like computer science, or you have to study like some form of engineering or study business because it's a bit more like general. But I honestly think the best thing that young folks can do is just prepare to have a mindset that allows for them to change careers and to know that like gone are the days of graduating college and going to work for one corporation and, you know, working there until it's time to retire. Like you're definitely going to keep changing and keep evolving. So to be able to position yourself in a way so that you can pivot. And I think that's really going to be, you know, what's like most helpful for young folks. And to also, you know, there's great importance of being a specialist in certain fields, but I think as time goes on, it will be helpful to kind of be a bit more of a generalist, so you can kind of like dabble in other fields. And you know, that's something that I've been finding, you know, with my like academic pursuits as well. Like you know, being interested in technology, being interested in architecture. You know, architects aren't specialists; they're like DJs or they're like composers that bring a lot of people together. And I think the more folks are like going to pursue certain career paths that have more of a general understanding of what's going on, that would, you know, allow for them to be, you know, quite successful, or, you know, be able to be productive members of society. And yeah, and I think just to quickly touch on what Dr. Reynolds was talking about earlier with fear, you know, I feel like yeah, there's been like so much hype of like, you know, what's AI going to do, especially in like the last year or so. But I think taking a step back from just like all that hype, kind of like Calvin mentioned earlier, like AI, as we've interacted with it, have been more so just like predictive models that have like helped us and we've enjoyed it. Like whatever you decide to watch on Netflix or whatever comes on there, you know, you're engaging with AI. Or when Amazon is like, hey, I think you should buy these shoes, you know, it's just because you've been looking at all of these like, you know, Gucci shoes or whatnot. So it's, you know, recommending that you do that. But where the fear might come in is like what certain like dangerous possibilities might be. And I think that's honestly more of a fear of just like our culture and our society, and maybe giving like autonomy and agency to AI systems kind of like amplifies you know, some of those fears. But you know, I think that kind of ties in with Dr. Reynolds' overall points about this, is this link between like values, religion, and technology, in a way where it's like, you know, maybe if we just focus more on our values and our community and what we've got to do, we'll be less concerned about some of these like nightmare scenarios of AI.
Cheryl Alexander, you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you again. This is a very interesting, very informative seminar. I'm very honored to be a part of it. My question is with the AI in terms of regulation. Yes, we live in a capitalistic society, and any new innovative, I don't know, whatever technology or whatever it is that comes on board and people can capitalize on it and make lots of money, yeah, they take the ball and they run with it. before thinking about what are some of the consequences to certain parts of populations that this might affect. So with the AI, I'm just curious. I mean, in this country, yes, we're very diverse, and the world is diverse. So AI is not just limited to America, it's a global thing. How are these systems, we're talking technology. Today, the world is completely connected technologically. So with AI coming on the scene and this kind of global effect, because it's very diverse. Forget having 3 people in the room. It's such a diverse world in so many ways. Any AI system that is developed is going to eliminate, it's going to put this, it's not going to recognize certain populations in certain ways. So do those populations create AI systems for themselves? Or is this a political thing where, everyone needs to be represented in some kind of general across the board AI system, like transportation, airports, or whatever, what have you? Because it seems like AI is it's big and across the board. It's not just a limited, defined area where it's only going to affect a certain population. So for example, if you have 3 people in the room developing an AI system, it's not only going to affect the population that they are privy to. There are lots of other populations out there that are going to be.
So your question is about the globalization?
My question is, about regulation, what is the global kind of direction with AI? Is there a global direction here with AI? Like what's happening? People travel all over the world now.
Cal, you want to take it, Peter? Which one of you would jump into that one?
I can take this one.
Okay.
So when the question about is there a global direction on regulation? So one of the things that those of us in the software
and regulation on a real higher level of regulation.
Those of us in the software industry understand that regulation when it comes to anything software related and technology is region based. It is, and so I'll give you a quick example. There's something called GDPR within the EU region. They have their own regulations safeguarding their software and regulating software within the region, right? Mm-hmm. So within the state of California, they have something specific called CCPA around software. And depending on the industry that you're in, I believe someone mentioned in the chat there in the healthcare industry, there's something called HIPAA regulations, and there's fines associated with that, and there's things that need to be done. In the IT industry, there's also things called SOC 2 compliance and the like. So history has told us regulation is always, in America, somewhere around 10 years behind the technology. And if you understand something about any industry, there's lobbyists and all kinds of people involved. So it takes a lot of effort to move Washington to be in lockstep with where technology is going, because these are entrepreneurs. They're not really looking for someone to give them permission to do something. If there's an opportunity, they're looking to solve a problem with the tools that are available. So that is a very difficult question, because there is no overarching one body. It depends on the region that you're in, your jurisdiction that you're in, the governing structure that is there. And that will dictate the regulations of technology being used within the jurisdiction that you're in. So, my answer is more of a deadpan answer, but that's basically what we face when it comes to building technology tools, those of us in the software industry.
So it's a lot of collateral. I'm thinking in the meantime, there's going to be collateral damage in the meantime, and it's very kind of up and down and kind of like, let's see where we go. Let's see how it goes. Let's see where it goes. And it's just kind of open like that.
Mm-hmm. We're going to move on to Dr. Myers. I see so many hands up. Then we're going to go to Fritzy, and then we're going to go to Rashid.
Well, my question really goes right along the same regulatory track that that Cheryl and Peter and Jabari are talking about. Should citizens be creating a local regulatory board like we have a board of education? Should we be creating or offering to submit legislation that would create regulatory boards around this issue of facial recognition technology or criminal justice categories? Is that something that we should do, or should we wait for it to come from the top down, or should the people fight to have it come from the grassroots up?
Calvin, you're next. I don't know.
I think that's a great perspective to have. The challenge that we have is that AI is different from almost everything else. It's totally different from GDPR, totally different from HIPAA and some of the industry-based legislations that we've had. And that's simply because in those spaces, in that industry-based approach, is pretty localized. You can kind of control what happens in the industry. AI is different in a sense where, because AI basically is cross-industry in itself. And whenever you have that issue, then the people who are most likely to suffer are people of color.
That's what I'm
I say in the book, you know, if you
collateral damage.
When something can go wrong, right, then it goes terribly wrong for people of color. So pick predictive policing, protect law enforcement. Well, it impacts, someone said earlier, it impacts all types of folk. Well, we know that predictive policing does not impact anybody other than Black people. Because the applications that we deploy and that we deliver are typically in Black areas, right? And let's just stick with that, because I think let's just tackle this from a regulatory perspective around policing, right? When we build applications around predictive policing, we do it two different ways. There's place-based predictive policing, and there's person-based predictive policing. So place-based is basically when you use AI basically to really to analyze pre-existing crime across a jurisdiction, if you will. And then person-based predictive policing is when you're using AI really to identify individuals or a group of people. I would submit one to say, I talk about this in the book, you won't find a predictive policing system in any other neighborhood except for Black neighborhoods. You won't see a sign that says predictive policing in the white areas of your city. There's a reason for that, right? There's a reason for that. So if there are going to be legislation, right, you have to say that people have to legislate their morality. They have to legislate what science says. And science says that Black people commit more crime. That's what the science says, simply because that's what they are tracking. I say earlier, right, if you are basically using AI to determine, like we're working on some applications, I've seen it and I've worked on them, like police forces all around the country, they all want to use AI to help them solve crimes, rightfully so. And what they do is, in order to use AI, anybody on this panel will tell you that it's a historical reference point. Meaning, in order to be able to train the model, we train it with data that you've collected over a period of time. So if you're only basically patrolling in a Black area, chances are you're going to have a historical record of finding more Black criminals. So if you got 20 police and 19 of them are patrolling Black areas and one is patrolling the white, which one of those are you going to find more crime? So you do that over a 20-year period, and then you bring Calvin and his team in, and you want to basically track where crime is going to be provided. First thing I'm going to ask you is, okay, I want to see your data over the last 15 years. What do you think that data is going to look like? It's going to be basically, it's going to show a lot of Black arrests, because that's where over the last 15 to 20 years, you've actually had your staff or your cars allocated to. So getting back to the question at hand, right? If it's like, what can legislation do? Well, if you're not legislating the people side of it, you're certainly not going to legislate the AI side. So it's a culture side issue. I believe in self-regulation. I believe that industries have to self-regulate first. That's what we've seen. And then after we self-regulate ourselves, right, then the federal government can come in. I think there needs to be a both. Someone said earlier, is it a top-down approach? Government, which is responsible for protecting us against technology and or people, or we can self-regulate from the bottom up. I think we have to do both. I think we have to self-regulate ourselves within the industry, within finance, within mortgage, within loans, within retail, within advertisement. There have to be some level of self-regulation. And then the government, which is traditionally how they've always done it, they have to step in and protect us from big business. They have to protect us from big business. And then the lobbyist gets involved, which is kind of why we don't have things like gun control. It's not because people don't want to do it, it's because of the lobbyists. And I think the same thing is happening in the tech industry.
Mm-mm.
Thank you.
I have to get to Fritzy and Rashid. Fritzy.
But thank you, Nolu, for inviting me and Dr. Reynolds. I know that I would take part in some great conversation. And today I was listening to the panel and I was saying, wow, Peter is really optimist and thinks we can regulate. And even Calvin was saying that, even if it's gonna kill us, but let's talk about now. But myself, I believe that we have created a monster. And the way someone said, if you believe in God, we should put our knees down and say, God, have mercy. We have created a monster. We have created a new God. It's true. Now, until this happens, and my question will come about transhumanism, until this level, until we reach this level, what do we do? Do we crash standing or sitting or having the right position? And I know I'm being a victim of this because as a Black woman, as you can see, whenever you have a background, you need to have your hair straight, because if you don't, your hair will go all over. And why? As you were saying, because we don't have enough female, and all the people that are doing the coding are male, and that's for another day. But my question, Dr. Reynolds, is for you. Some people said that since this AI thing will develop, and remember, we have had ChatGPT for only less than a year. ChatGPT came out in December. If after maybe 2 years, these things take over, as we heard all the examples that were given, what do we do? Some people, they are proposing that we become one with the machine in order to control it. And my question is for you, should we accept to become one with the machine, like the transhumanism level, in order to be able to steer it or guide it?
Well, Dr. Myers always coaches me to be quieter so other people can talk. So I can't be quiet on this one, because the reason I wrote this book is because God spoke to me and said, technology is offensive to me, defend me. And so we have a system when you have all these scientists getting together, you don't see any of them calling on God or bringing in the preachers or the pastors. We have a godless machine culture. And in my book, this is what God said to me. He said, I have a complaint in the mint. Am I so far removed from human hearts that they cannot imagine that their actions and technology could cause me pain? Do they see that they could push me to harsh and swift action as they have done so often? So I understand my engineer friends and I love them, but I still believe that God is not pleased with science creating substitute human beings, robots, putting them in the place of the humans that he created. The emphasis on artificial. When you say artificial intelligence, we ought to know that we are the have the authentic intelligence, and all this other is artificial. It's phony. It's not going to help us. And then we don't talk about spiritual technology, just artificial technology. And so we have to come back to a God presence. And I'm going to quit because I think I'll just go on and on, but I do believe that we are in danger. And I think some of the danger that we've seen, God is not pleased. I think that was COVID coming. Now you see the fires coming in Canada, in Maryland, we can't breathe, and on and on. So I think that what we need to do is when our people are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then God will heal our land. And so I'm really concerned about a lack of a God consciousness and a lack of human consciousness. When I hear scientists talk about the soul is software and the body is hardware, they squeeze the numinous quality, the spiritual quality out of our bodies and out of our life as something that technology can control. And I'm very, very concerned. So I'm glad that you asked me, Fritzy, so I could get that out. I will go on to, thank you. I will go on to
Nolu,
and then Tina.
Okay.
No,
First of all,
Rashid.
Doc.
Okay, Nolu, then Rashid, then Tina.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Dr. Myers, Dr. Reynolds, Dr. Lawrence, soon to be Dr. Jabari, Dr. Peter. This is just amazing. I'm learning so much, and it's really a blessing for me to be around you folks who've been thinking about this. You know, I'm sort of represent your average, somewhat bright person, but really not understanding a lot of this. So I have basically 3 points that I've gathered from this discussion that I would like whoever wants to jump in on it to react. I had a situation with Geico that was all about the algorithms, and basically I got screwed. I'll spare you the details. I ended up canceling Geico. Question is, how do we protect ourselves from the algorithms? You know, like in the olden days, you could go sit down, talk to somebody, and they say, oh, you've been the customer for 20 years and you've never had a case, blah, blah, you would work something out. But now the people don't even come to the site. They don't want to hear, you know, the algorithms are in charge. So how do we protect ourselves? Secondly, this thing about no jobs. You know, I sort of like the idea of not having to, you know, work for a living, and I can go sit on the beach or read a book or go visit with folks. So, I mean, so what's the problem? Of course, we got to figure out how you pay the rent and stuff.
Yeah,
so a question about that. And then on this regulation, you know, you got all these members of Congress, as an example, who are in their 80s and 70s and still using flip phones and just completely clueless. And as you, Dr. Lawrence, have so brilliantly pointed out, things are happening now. We can't wait for 10 years for the legislation to catch up. So maybe, as Dr. Myers pointed out, it is a bottom-up approach. And as an organizer, I want to know, how do we make that happen? But again, thank you for a brilliant panel, and I look forward to hearing more.
Wow, I mean, you know, I'll chime in a little bit and let the others do the same. I think you bring up Geico, you bring up the insurance examples. think sometimes we forget that AI just didn't start when people start talking about it. Like we've been doing AI. I've been building apps AI for like 8 years. Every insurance app that you see is AI. And it's been AI, right? And it's always been biased in a sense, right? You think about the algorithm for Geico will tell you, or I won't use Geico, I'll use any insurance company. It will tell you what your premiums are. Well, what are they basing that on? You know that if you live in one area of the town, your rates are higher, your insurance rates are higher than if you live on another side. They don't ask you whether you're black or you're white. There's no place in that document that you fill, or when you call the insurance agents and they quote you a rate, not one time do they ask you whether you're black or you're white. They know they can't do that, but they know they can derive that information by lots of analytical means. And they do, because that's important for them to do that, because they want to, your rate needs to be higher in their mind if you live in a black area, for no type of scientific data other than the systemic racism that we see all the time, and what they're tracking, who you catching, where your police officers are, right? So my first point to your question is that, hey, AI has been around forever, right? For years, we've been doing AI. It's just now it's a big thing. And you're seeing people saying, I'm an AI expert. I'm like, that kind of actually bothers me. It bothers me when people weren't doing AI last year, but today they tell you they're AI expert. Like, that's kind of crazy to me. Like, if you weren't doing it 6 months ago, then you can't be an expert today. You could just be knowledgeable on it, but you can't be an expert. So that's my first thought. Back on the regulatory requirements piece, I just think what Dr. Reynolds said is so akin to this whole issue. I believe that God is challenging us, and he challenged us with how we govern ourselves. That's always been the conflict in my mind between godliness and people. Like, we want a king, we want to govern ourselves. And I think that God is challenging us and say, what are you going to do with this technology that's upon you? Because it's been around a long time. Now that the difference between today and yesterday is, yesterday there was 100 apps. Today there are 1 million apps. There was no industry that hasn't been touched. I believe that we need a people first legal framework with individuals' rights, with people's rights, with godly people's right as the central tenet, right? And until that happens, then we're going to struggle, because there's no specific law today that addresses artificial intelligence, the bias in it. There's no law, because most of the laws that are anti-discrimination laws, they came about even before the internet was a thing. They can't even be applied. A person who wants to create a bias app will always be able to get around an existing anti-discrimination law. And you're seeing it, right? So I do believe that there's a godliness. That's why I love the fact that Dr. Reynolds wrote the book, and we talked about that, because I believe that this is quickly becoming a moral issue, and our morality is based upon what we believe in.
Calvin, I want to make sure you put the name of your book in the chat, because your book is very good, hidden in white sight, so that they can buy your book. Of course, mine too, but also yours. Rashid is next.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. Thanks to Marcia Skeet for inviting me to this conference. So I want to go back to, because when I came on, I believe Dr. Lawrence, Calvin Lawrence was speaking, and he hit on a very important point, and that was the algorithm and how they're intrinsically, or they tend towards biases in our community. And then we had Ms. Phyllis raise a very critical question in terms of the direction that we should kind of direct our young people for the future. Now, well, the future is now. I don't believe that question that Ms. Phyllis put forward was actually addressed. And I want to bring you guys back to it. I'd like to hear Dr. Lawrence's perspective on that. But I want to also, as we go into that, just touch on another few things that develop. Someone had mentioned that, you know, there's collateral damage in the process, and pardon me if I don't mention your name, but we are always the collateral damage as a people. Only this evening I went into an institution that a hospital and going through the I guess it was, I don't know, whatever it was that triggered my phone. He took the phone and then turned to me and said, "Well, do you have a knife in your bag?" I'm a tall, big black man. I'm assuming that he just thought that because I'm a black man, I carry a knife. I said, there's no need for that. But going back to all of this, we now look, and I'm going to turn the tables on this group. This is Black Nurses Association. And I have realized over time, the challenge with us as a people is that although we're connected organizations, we act individually. So the challenge is, and the call for regulation or the question about regulation was raised. And yes, there has to be regulation. Dr. Lawrence, I disagree with you on self-regulation. It doesn't happen. The financial industry does not regulate itself, and I've been a part of it for over 30 years. We have to direct or focus to those we place in Congress from our communities to bring about those regulations that are equitable. And what my question to you is, if we can go back again to the question that Ms. Phyllis raised in terms of how then should we direct our young people? Because the future is now. And unless groups like this organization come together, pull our Congress and pull their coattails and says, look, we need a regulation that will be equitable in this industry to our own people. It's not going to happen. And everyone on here is a leader. You're a leader in your community. Ms. Nontonga said she's actually one of those individuals. So I'm going to turn the tables, as I said, on you guys and expect this group from here on in to do something in the way of continuing this conversation, not just continue the conversation, but challenge our elected officials. We need equity in this. So, Mr. Lawrence, I'd like to hear your perspective, again, to the question, because I believe everyone spoke to it, that Ms. Phyllis raised in terms of how then shall we marshal our young people futuristically as far as careers are concerned. And then I want to quickly go to the whole perspective that was raised in terms of God. And now there was a verse that was quoted, and it was as if my people. Now I'm going to stop you guys there, because that verse does not apply to necessarily everyone, because not everyone calls himself people of God. So that is for the people of God. Now he's also, because it was a verse from the Bible, said to us to go into all the world. Now the world that we have is different than it was 10 years ago. And we're looking at technology. So if we fail to go in and to take ground, we can't blame those who come in and bring their perspective. So again, it is about marshaling our community, marshaling our young people, and directing them in the way that they should go for the benefit of all. So, Dr. Lawrence.
And right before an answer, may I just quickly just say one thing? It's not just the nurses, please. This is Black Women for Positive Change with other groups involved. Just to clarify that one point before we move on.
Thanks for the clarity, Ms. Skeet, and I'm glad you said that, because now the platform is even bigger to marshal more people.
Okay. But just want to clarify. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll start, Mr. Boyce, by thanking you for the correction. I agree with you. I certainly agree that the financial industry and the healthcare industry have not done a very good job of self-regulating themselves, and I think that there's a reason for that. But back to your question, which is what you asked. I believe our young people is ripe to challenge the system with leadership from us. And, you know, we one of the things that we're doing, we just started this AI for Black Kids foundation, nonprofit, Coding the Change, right? Where we're really hitting them from age 6 to 19 all the way up. And we're having these level of conversations. And the whole goal around this AI piece is not how we build systems and not necessarily how we are trying to convince them to go into STEM, although that is an important part of it. But we believe that AI is a business technology. It's different than Java. It's different than COBOL. Folk like me made my bones on being a great Java programmer, being a great C++. At that point, the only people who would be talking about this, if it was a technology, would be technologists, right? If this was a Java or a traditional programming conversation, you wouldn't be having journalists, you wouldn't be having other industries speaking on it. We've seen that in the past. So it tells you that AI is not necessarily a technology statement, it's a business statement. And the people who monetize it know it as such. That's what the purpose of it. If I have a team of 10 AI people, only probably 3 of them are actual coders. The other 7 are not, but they're key and critical. So anybody on this team, we're all technologists, they will agree with me that out of 10 people, 9 of them are not data scientists and programmers. They got lots of other skill sets, design thinkers, you got lots of other folk. So I believe, to your question, sir, that really our kids and our children, we have to basically give them the tools to be successful. What are those tools? Those tools is basically creating a framework so that they can have a seat at the table. I don't personally trust people over at the seats at the table over the age of 35 to 40, like even myself, because we've already sold out as a company, as a country, right? We got houses, we got kids, we got our 401ks. These corporations know that they can milk us and maneuver us however we want to. And I've seen enough Black folk sitting at the table who were not able to talk or not even willing to talk. So just having us at the table when you got a whole lot to lose is, in my mind, I would rather you not be at the table. But our young folk are different. Like my daughters, they made up of something totally different than even I am, right? Because they don't have the same challenges. My 18-year-old daughter, typically, she's gonna speak her mind and she don't care what she lose in the process, because in the end, she feels though she can go home and live with her daddy, right? Well, I couldn't go home and live with my mom. That was my whole generation. We basically had nowhere else to go. So what happens is that even though some of us are at the table, we are mute, right? So I believe that we need to give our children the types of information that they need in order for them to go off. Like for instance, on this Bill of Rights thing that you're hearing, we're doing a book tour at the HBCUs. And we're basically, the idea is that we're going to each HBCU. We're working with the deans of those HBCUs, or we're in the process of doing that, by the way. We haven't actually did it. We kicked it off. But we're working with the deans, we're working with the students, and they're going to create what they consider to be the Bill of Rights. Because if you go to the Congressional Bill of Rights page, the Congress, it don't look like us. It's a bunch of technology companies who are telling the government what they should put in their Bill of Rights. And it doesn't reflect us at all. So what we need to do is we need to empower our children to be able to speak. They understand this more so than we do. And they're fearless. And we're not, to be reality. I mean, how many, look, there's a lot of data scientists, there's a lot of AI people who are working for tech companies. How many of them are standing up telling us the truth? Very few of them. They all know it. They all know the truth. We all know how these apps are built. We know that Black people, as people of color, that we suffer in many times, especially these critical environments and critical industries that we're talking about, healthcare, policing, advertisement, what we see on TV, and how the AI is. We know that Murphy's Law, if something could go wrong, it will go wrong. If you're Black, it's gonna go terribly wrong. We know that as designers, we know that as developers, but how many of them do you see speaking up? And that's because they can't. They can, but they won't, because they're not going to be willing to lose their plush jobs and their plush, 400, 500K, 100K a year salaries. And I don't really question them. I don't challenge them. I think unless you basically say that you're willing to lose it all, you're not going to stand up for this, but our kids will stand up.
Yeah, I've got something to add on that topic, specifically on what should the younger kids do and where should they focus. So Calvin mentioned something earlier, and I finished my thesis on the specific type of AI that I'm doing just this past May at Columbia. And during our graduation, I had my friend, my barber was actually my photographer, right, during graduation. And afterwards, he came and told me, he was like, man, it took forever before they called your name. Is it all Chinese in your school? It was 85% in the artificial intelligence and applied analytics program. And I was one of 2 Black folks graduating from the program, right? So in my whole AI, applied analytics and all that, I did not see anyone that looks like me. Classes that I went, conferences that I went, projects that I worked on, when I talk to companies, et cetera, you can name it. And my whole career in the software industry has been like that. So Calvin, I can empathize with you on that. This is a topic that people do not know about, don't speak about, and does not resonate within our communities, because I'm going to say something that is quite blunt, but is the honest truth. Most of our kids are not, and I don't have kids yet, but I'm just saying, like, we do not focus our community in these areas whereby the impactful systems being built have our representation. It's just the truth. Every class that I've been in my career, and I've always been in hard tech, on either like the machine learning side, AI, and those types of things. I'm not even talking about just pure software development or design or product management. I do not see people that look like me. And whenever I want to work on projects, there's not folks like me that I can call. So sometimes people will say like, hey man, like, how come you partner with these folks? You're like, well, in the type of stuff that I'm doing, I would like to call some more people. So I do things like, when I was at Columbia, we would go around Harlem and we would work with the SBA to even just have like kids care about even just building a website or just writing one line of code. When they go home, they get discouraged or they get veered into another direction. Well, guess what? The way the world is going in right now, these systems are actually the most critical things that are driving our society. We've talked about mortgage rates. We've talked about insurance rates. We've talked about healthcare. We've talked about defense, law enforcement. Without representation in the room, and what does that mean? That means for you to get into that interview, to get into that room, you need to know what you're talking about. If you're not prepared, if you did not take those courses, if you don't practice those methods for you to be proficient when you get into that interview, and let's face it, for us, you just don't need to be good. Calvin could probably relate to this. You need to be about 2.5 times better. You need to be really good. There's no holes in anything that you say. It has to be really good. It has to be on point. Your error rate is really low compared to other people. Other folks can get the benefit of the doubt. So that preparation takes years. It takes interest. It takes encouragement from parents, from community to say this is something that is worth it and not exactly other avenues that folks have been traditionally following. When the kids don't get that encouragement, they mimic what adults do within their environment. If there's no encouragement, if there's no push, they will not take those routes. And what happens is if they go into an interview, they will not qualify to get into that room. And subsequently, when those algorithms are being built, that diverse perspective will not be there. And this system will keep perpetuating on. So the encouragement piece is really big. Now, the second part is when we talked about regulation in the case of Geico, typically people will go to CFPB and write a report if a business harmed them in some kind of way. I'll give you guys a really short example and I stop here. When the case for social media went to Congress a couple of years ago, I don't know how many people saw that when Facebook and all these guys were being paraded in social media. How many Congress people even knew how to use the app? Remember how long it took because the Congress members wanted a lot of time to even understand how social media works before they can even say anything, before they can chime in, before they can ask these executives any questions. So the education with the regulators is lacking in these areas. When you present these newer complex technologies, they don't understand them. They don't know what to ask. They don't know what to regulate. On the other side, you have lobbyists who have funded certain legislators to maybe delay and drag regulation. And that way, you know, revenue can be generated until the cost of doing business can be imparted. So if we're at 100 billion market capitalization, you fine our company for $1.3 million. That's the cost of doing business, drop in the bucket, but we're already at 100 billion cap, right? So these are the things that we face. In my mind, the encouragement is the biggest thing that I personally see that I can do. These programs, having people interested in them, especially kids, and making them feel like you're not weird for not doing something else. This is something really worth it. This is something important. This is something that will open opportunities for you in the future. And coupled with grit, when you get into that room, you can influence direction and decision.
Wow, very interesting because Black Women for Positive Change, we're trying to start an academy to equip children with ethics and the technological training. You've really given us a lot to think about, but we can't stay here all night. So I want to have my grandson give us his views because he's listened a lot. And then David Grogan, our friend here, to ask his question. And then I'm going to have to just say a few words and we have to get out of here and go home. Well, I guess we're already home. So just go off the air, right? That's right. Okay.
Yeah, I think the question was brought up a while ago, so I'm not sure where we're at with it now, but I think to kind of like address a couple of points that have come up recently, I think it was really great and like timely for Peter to mention social media and how I wouldn't say how it plays into this, but more so how this is a model of how things could go when it comes to like something like regulation and like with social media, for example. I don't know if you saw, but like I think today the attorneys general of 41 states have like sued Meta for basically going after teens and using basically methods that would allow for them to be like addicted to their platform. And this is something that we've like known for a while, and we've obviously seen this becoming a troubling issue with teens between like having rising rates of like depression and anxiety. But it's extremely hard to find ways to regulate that, especially from this top-down approach as we've been like talking about. But I think when we're trying to like look for solutions, what's really helpful is to do like exactly what's happening now for people to get together to educate themselves on the topic and to find ways to reach out to their like local elected officials to inform them of these issues. And then hopefully we'll get to the point where our elected officials are maybe creating task forces that are able to be kind of like more with the times when it comes to creating legislation that could help protect folks. And you mentioned CFPB earlier, and I was fortunate to work with one of the creators of that, Senator Elizabeth Warren. And when I was working with her as well, I was these are issues that I was really concerned about. And I know that kind of like led me down my path of pursuing a degree in architecture by being really interested in how we come together in spaces, whether it's virtual or in person. But I know this question keeps coming up around well, what are we going to tell the kids to do? What are we going to tell young folks to do? But yeah, I think everything that's been mentioned between like grit, being aware of certain opportunities in technology, and allowing for parents, mentors, friends, family to encourage young folks like within these fields. And I think it's really helpful to both pair some sort of like career pursuits in STEM, but also something creative as well. And that goes back to what we were saying much earlier in the conversation about the idea of some forms of AI like taking our work. And I feel like the more creative stuff we do, that's like the hardest stuff to take away. But yeah, I think my like very last point, just kind of like to sum up how I feel about a lot of this, is that it's clear that certain AI systems will affect not just low income work, but very much like mid-level work as well. And I think with that, it's really important for us to like come together, be educated on the topic, and also to think about how do we value labor in our society? Like, do we think about things like universal basic income? Do we think about ways of like providing supplemental income for people who've really been displaced by these changes in the workforce over time? But we don't have all the answers right now, but there are a lot of like helpful things to think about, and we'll see how it all goes.
I think David had a question. It was
yeah, thank you, Dr. Reynolds. I'll be really quick. I know we're short on time. I really didn't have a question, just had sort of a comment. One, I think Calvin made an excellent point. I too have a 25-year-old daughter who lives with me, and I've always embraced and appreciated young people. But you will always hear us say we need to get a seat at the table. We have a seat at the table. We've had seats at the table for many years, but most of us, as Calvin pointed out, and I've never heard anybody mention this, we're afraid to speak up and to speak out. And because we're afraid, they know we are afraid. And so what we have to do, and we're afraid for legitimate reasons, as Calvin pointed out. Once you have cars, houses, debt, debt is the modern day slavery. And so I think we have to teach our young people not to take on all this debt, because I don't think they have that interest in that traditional excess amount of debt. Because once you have the excess amount of debt, no matter where you are, I happen to be law enforcement, public safety, security, and I'm a proud whistleblower. When the time came up for me to speak out and say, well, this ain't right, I did, but that's not the norm. Most of us are not going to speak up and say, this isn't right. This is impacting Black America. This is going to hurt us. We're just not going to do it. So I just want to thank y'all. This was a great discussion. I appreciate it.
Can I just jump in here on that one point? That has always been the case. Going back to slavery days and probably before slavery, there are always folks who are afraid, and we understand, no shade on them, but there have always been a few of us, even in my own career, who have spoken out. And even in this situation, there are going to be a few people, they will always be the minority, because they got the car note, the house note, et cetera, this trip to the Bahamas, wherever. That has always been the case, but we've always had a few people, such as the esteemed Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds, who have spoken out. And I think we have to really look at it as a spiritual thing and just take it to God and hope that he will, and believe that he will guide and direct us. Thank you.
In closing, I want to quote what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said: "Man cannot save him or the world, and unless he is guided by God's Spirit, his newfound scientific power will be transformed into a devastating Frankenstein that will bring his earthly life to ashes." Dr. King said that in 1965, and his words are still true. We cannot fix this mess that we're in unless we come to God and let him guide us. I want to thank Dr. Myers, who made sure that we had this conference. I mean, she really guides me. She sent out flyers. She did all kinds of things to make it work. I'd like to thank Dr. Calvin Lawrence. I hope you do buy his book. And I want to thank Peter Attore, who gave us some brilliant discussion points. And of course, I want to thank my godson, Jabari, Canada. He is going to be an expert in so many things, but he needs to be around us, and we certainly need to be around him. So thank you very much, and we will keep it moving and keep growing. Thank you and good night.
And
Good
thank
night.
you,
Thank you
Dr.
all.
Reynolds.
I
Thank you
enjoyed
for
it.
your
Thank you all.
vision and your
Enjoyed it.
leadership. Thank you,
Fantastic.
Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Reynolds.
I see you, Monica. Thanks for being here. Doreen, Leslie, I see you. Pearline, Washington, Randy.